friends and fans of the podcast. Welcome to another day in our special place in the Milky Way. Is that a corny intro? I mean, don't you get some credit if you have a podcast for being corny at some point? Is there really a person in this world who has never been corny? Ever? Well, I guess Sean Connery was a cool cat his whole entire life. But, at any rate, today's episode is B sharp and C. Vinyl is better than digital? Did I throw the question mark in there correctly? We tend to have this, I don't know if I would call it a wave, but we have like an increasing wave of people starting in 2007 who are buying vinyl. No, it's not the baby boomers. It's not people who are 73 years old and they're like, I want to remember what it was like when I was a teenager. And then they go and buy vinyl record. No, that's not what's actually happening. What's really happening is the age bracket of like 23 to 45 or 23 to 35 are really the number of people who are going out and buying vinyl records. And since 2007, the number has steadily increased. I'm gonna hit on a few things, but I'm also going to just kind of take the neutral road when it comes to a few things. First of all, some people just come right out and they say, well, of course vinyl's better. There's no signal loss. Or the analog recording is not compressed. It's better than the original recording. The analog recording is truer to the original recording. Some say, hey, there's higher highs and lower lows, or it just sounds better. And I will address those thoughts. I will say one thing. There is science. Some statements with regard to music can be very subjective. Wow, I just love the way Jimi Hendrix plays the guitar. To me, he's the best. Or some people just will say, like Stevie Ray Vaughan, he's got like a cult following. Stevie Ray Vaughan was like an open channel to melody. He was the best guitarist that ever lived. Okay. That's so insanely subjective. There's no argument. You can't argue with something that's that subjective, because all you're going to do is end up getting into a back and forth of opinions. Oh, yeah, well, I think Jimmy Page is better than Stevie Ray Vaughan. And how do you even measure that? You really can't, right? Some things with this whole digital vinyl dispute, I guess you could call it, are actually measurable. Some of it is actually, it's etched in stone. It's just science. It doesn't affect your or my opinion about what you prefer to listen to. But there are some things that science just comes right down and says, no, this is the science. I'll give you an example. A lot of people turn to vinyl and they say, well, there's no signal loss because when you use digital, you're losing some information. You can only sample so much of the analog sound, and then it gets packaged up into a packet of digital information, and the analog signal, some analog sound is lost. That's a very interesting argument. And I'm going to say this. Go to YouTube. There's two videos out there. One of them is by Priyan Joni. The name of the video is Vinyl Really Better Than Digital? Try this experiment. And the other one is by Real Engineering, The Truth About Vinyl versus Digital. They really break it down good, especially the Real Engineering. It gets into just the science. And Priyan Joni gets into the science of it, but he also admits he has a preference, and that's really nice. You get that organic point of view towards the whole thing as well, which I am going to hope to do during this episode. I want to give you a little bit of my organic point of view. So first of all, signal loss. It is true. It is true that a digital signal will have to sample the analog sound, and then after a certain amount of samples, it packages it up and gets it ready for the listener. And some analog information is not used. Is that analog information that isn't used making it so that digital is worse? Well, there's science behind this, and there's something that we have to take into consideration. Over the years, televisions have gotten a lot better. I mean, I've seen some televisions in BJ's, and it looks like I'm looking through a window. I almost want to reach my arm into the television and grab, a cup full of that waterfall that they have in the background. Television has gotten clearer, and the reason why is because science has proven to us that our eyes can notice a better quality picture. So regular HD became 1080, became 4K, became 5K. Pretty soon we're going to be literally just transported into the inside of the movie and just experience it like we're in it. But science proves that our eyes will continue to perceive an increase in quality. Well, that really hasn't happened with digital sound. 44,000 hertz is like the average bit rate that they use for sampling, right? 44,000 hertz is the common sample rate, and I believe the human ear can notice a difference up to 22,000 hertz. So we're essentially using double the sample rate that's necessary for the human ear to even distinguish a difference. So scientifically, and the reason why I say scientifically is because there have been scientific studies over this that go back decades that prove that, 44,000 is enough. We don't need to go any better than that, unlike the need to increase the digital quality of an image on a television. And as far as signal loss, what's interesting about that is that if you want to actually break it down and compare one to the other, vinyl tends to have more loss because the stylus, depending upon how high the high is or how low or how loud the low is, the stylus will not always have a smooth passage through the grooves. There are times it actually bounces over the grooves. This happens on a very small level. You cannot see it with your eye. But there are times that it bounces over the grooves when there's high highs because the grooves are close together and the stylus doesn't reach the bottom of the groove, so you actually get some distortion depending upon how high the high is. So a lot of people say you can hear high highs and low lows better with vinyl. Science doesn't prove that, but that doesn't mean that that person doesn't perceive some type of difference that is more enjoyable to them. I will come right out and say it. I, for years, thought that analog gave you lower lows and higher highs. I just assumed it. I never looked into the science of it until now. And it's the same exact thing with, record stores. I thought record stores were a thing of the past, like Blockbuster. No. People are going to record stores. They're buying records. They walk into the music store. They buy an LP, vinyl, and they walk out. Right? Now, some say that analog is truer to the original recording. Okay, I understand that argument, that analog is truer to the original recording. However, a lot of this depends. Are you listening to the Doors? The Doors have some loud organ parts that are only recorded in the right ear. But on vinyl, the stylus will actually feel the vibrations from one side of the groove and play it in the left ear as like some form of very minute bleed over or bleeding. I think they call it stereo bleeding or something. So it was recorded in the studio only in the right ear, but it bleeds over a little bit into the left ear if you use vinyl. Now, is that going to make the song sound bad? No. It won't. Is it going to be horribly noticeable? No. And even if it is noticeable, does it make the song sound bad? No. But vinyl isn't truer to the original recording in that sense. The organ solo by Raymond Zarek was played in the right ear. But on vinyl, you can hear a little bit of it in the left ear, and that was not in the original recording. But it bleeds over because the stylus will pick up the vibrations. Does that make a gigantic difference? Listen, I don't really think it does, but I just want to mention the science behind some of these things. There is actual science behind some of the. I'll give you another example. How 33 RPMs. Is your table actually spinning exactly at 33 RPMs? The other day I was listening to jazz downstairs and I heard the whole band come to a stop, and then the piano player just played a nice, beautiful chord. It was like a nice 9 chord, you know, and I'm like, oh yeah. And it sounded warped. Something was off. And I'm sure his piano wasn't warped. It was more than likely something with the rotation of the vinyl record, probably because I got a cheap record player. It was only $35 on Amazon. I didn't spend a lot of money on it, you know. Another thing, too, is what is the quality of your stylus? Does it pick up all of the information that's in the record that are in the grooves, right? How about this? What's the weight of the cartridge in which the stylus goes? What's interesting about these vinyl records is that they're very organic, and that's why we like them. Most people will actually say that they like the vinyl experience because it's so very tactile and organic. But so isn't the whole process. The record itself could just be different from another record. Maybe there was just a temperature difference, or maybe there was just something that happened in the fabrication of the record. Maybe it was stored a certain way. Maybe there's dust on it. Maybe your needle isn't good quality. Maybe your stylus weighs, or not your stylus, but your cartridge. Maybe your cartridge weighs twice as much as somebody else's cartridge. Therefore, there's more weight being pressed down on that stylus as it goes into the grooves. There are a lot of organic factors that go into the sound of a vinyl record that simply do not exist in digital. They don't exist. There's not even a comparison that I can do. I believe Priyan Joni does a really good comparison talking about, I believe it's like a digital audio converter, DAX or something. He actually gets into the science of it a lot better than I'm able to. So I still recommend watching those videos. They're good. They're factual. A lot of people say, well, you know what? It just sounds better. Vinyl just sounds better. I can understand. Okay, I'll give you an example of where I agree with that. I like to listen to jazz on vinyl. I don't know why. There is some panning taking place. If it bleeds over, it doesn't really matter to me. The bleed over is not going to be a lot because jazz doesn't really turn any of its instruments up. Even guitar solos in jazz, the best jazz guitar soloist is not going to ramp up the distortion, ramp up the gain, and blow your ears out of your head. They're usually smooth. So when you get jazz, you get a lot of things happening on purpose, not at a very high volume, usually not too low and not too high in tone either. So you get a lot of stuff up the middle. And I like the way horns, I like the way trumpet sounds on vinyl. It just stands out a little bit more. Now, I also like a lot of that, that Prohibition age sound, trumpet with a mute on it and stuff like that. And that was all played on vinyl. So, I mean, part of me likes the experience. But also, I did a test. I put in a record that was jazz, listened to it. It was nice. And on the same device, using the same speakers, it's a Bluetooth speaker, I went to Spotify and I put in the same exact song. And it sounded like the song was being run through a wet towel. It sounded a little bit muffled, but that could be a number of things. Vinyl is organic. For some reason, on my $35 turntable, I like the way jazz sounds more than I do MP3. But that's just jazz. If I want to listen to anything else, I prefer digital. But again, the difference is really not perceivable. It's quite small. It is scientifically proven to just not be perceptible by human ear, and a lot depends on everything else. The quality of the album, the stylus, the cartridge, the way that your turntable is spinning, the amount of shock absorbance that it has, the type of speakers that you have, the type of music that you have. I do believe, for me, I get a better listening experience on vinyl with jazz and blues, but that's just my opinion. So then why are people buying vinyl? Why is it making a comeback? Why do I need to do this podcast? Well, first of all, doing this podcast is fun. For me, anyways, because I like doing research like this. But why are people buying vinyl? Why are they getting back into it? Well, here's something very interesting, and I just learned this. When you buy an album, you own that whole entire piece of vinyl. That disc is yours. You're not buying a license. You're buying something that was fabricated. And quite honestly, the process of making a vinyl record is quite interesting, and all of that now belongs to you. You can pull out the record, feel it in your hands, carefully put it on the table as you carefully bring down the stylus. There's a process to listening to vinyl. Oh, and the artwork and the information. There's artwork and information on the cover that you just can't fit on something else. And it's funny because some people will say, yeah, but if you go to YouTube and you put the song on, the artwork is going to come up. Yeah, it's going to come up. And then it's going to disappear when the song's over and it's gone. It's not yours. It's an image playing in the background while the song is playing, and then it goes back to some server somewhere in California probably. You are owning a license to that song. You don't own the song. Doesn't make the listening experience, or I shouldn't say, okay, it affects the listening experience. It doesn't affect the sound quality, right? The listening experience with vinyl is very organic, very different. So there's always artwork you can appreciate. It's just not going to be the same if it's on your 3-inch iPhone or on YouTube. It's also a very deliberate thing. You end up engaging more with the music because you can go to Spotify, you can hit shuffle, put your phone down, pair it up with your Bluetooth speaker, right? And sit down, play cards with your friends, and have jazz playing in the background all night. Or you can stand up and walk over to your collection and go through the vinyl records in your hand, one by one, looking at the cover art, looking at the album, and then have to decide, do I put on side 1 or do I put on side 2? That's an experience. You do not and cannot ever get that with digital. So that's why a lot of people are turning to vinyl. Listening to music when they have guests over is not a 2-hour-long accident. You are in control. You are why the music is playing. Now, some people will say they like the sound quality of vinyl, and I agree that bringing the needle down to the record, listening to that sound, trust me, you're going to hear surface noise. You always will. It's the sound of the needle hitting the vinyl. But that whole experience is nice. It really is. And, I've heard a lot of argument that digital sounds too clean. And it can be. It can come across as too clean. But then again, if you're sitting in your home studio, or if you're working for a band and you want to make a recording and you want complete and total control, I don't think there's a better way than recording it digitally and then having it stored digitally. And then when you produce it digitally, you are always in control of everything that happens. You panned the guitar solo to the left, you have the organ to the right, the drums are 20% to the left because the singer is right up the middle and they're a little bit low in tone. You don't want too much mixing between the drums and the vocals, so you do this, you do. when you record digitally, you store the music digitally, and even reproduce it digitally, nothing organic gets in the way. It is a cleaner, more accurate way to record and even listen to music. But at the end of the day, our ears do not perceive the difference. Now, a million things could happen. Because it's so organic, a million things could happen in this whole entire process. But what I find to be more interesting, seriously, the most interesting about this whole entire topic is that it is not people in their 70s and 80s trying to remember their youth who are going out and buying these vinyl records. It's people who are young. What I want to do now is interview someone who actually falls into the millennial, as far as generations go, but identifies with older generations very well, but at the ripe age of 30 decides that he would prefer to listen to music on vinyl. Okay, so now we welcome friend of the podcast, Sammy Cologne, who just graduated. He is no longer just a friend of the podcast. He is now a contributor of the podcast. Sammy Cologne, thank you very much for doing this. Welcome to the podcast. It's interesting. I just want to kind of give it a little bit of background. So you have basically 30 years of experience listening to music. Yep. And from what I understand, you are a certified human. You even got your certificate as a human.
Yeah, correct. Bone and flesh, human being. Yep.
Bone and flesh. Got a certificate at birth. Really ahead of the game. I was a fast learner too. But the reason why I mention your age is because a lot of people think of vinyl and they think of the 85-year-olds going to the music store with their cane. Let me get in so I can grab that, Bing Crosby record. And millennials, and I know you really don't feel like you identify with that generation, but millennials, Gen Xers, which is what I fall into, right, are really the ones driving this wave of people going into the record store and buying vinyl. In fact, because of the younger generation, and I'm even talking people younger than you are, like in their mid-20s, because of the younger generation, a lot of people are buying vinyl. And they're influencing the older generation that grew up with vinyl to get back into vinyl. So it's really, I find this fascinating. I find this absolutely fascinating, especially in this digital age where everyone is like, they wake up and before they even go to the bathroom to pee, they're turning on their computer to check, their Facebook updates, or they're going to their phone. Did anyone, respond to my Instagram update? That's the generation that we have, but this is the generation that's driving the sales of vinyl. So I want to ask you personally, why vinyl?
Well, vinyl to me is a music experience that is sort of, you can say, genuine. You're getting it from the true source. Once that press happens, that's the master recording right there. It's even though it's still a copy of the masters, it's not streamed over the internet. It's not played through apps. You need to play it on a device, on a record player. And there's something magical about listening to an album on a record player with a nice pair of headphones. I think especially artists who might be a little older, that's how they grew up. So they record their albums, their LPs, to be played on vinyl. So I think there's something special about vinyl.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you. And that's a very common answer. And you get a lot of answers. You get people who say that it sounds better on vinyl. So I'm going to say something to you, and I'm going to pretend to be the contrarian, right? I'm just that jerk at the party who wants to disagree with everything you say. You're talking about how you buy vinyl records, and I'm rolling my eyes, and I'm huffing and puffing, and I say, oh, come on. Sammy. Get real. I mean, science proves that there's no real perceptible difference between digital and vinyl. I mean, how could you say one's better than the other? How would you respond to that?
Well, I would definitely ask if they've. Well, first off, I'd ask what their favorite album is, just to see the type of person I'm speaking to. And if I get an answer, I want to ask them, have you ever listened to it on vinyl compared to listening to it on CD in your car or on any sort of application on your phone? Have you even tried that? And I would tell them, you got to give it a shot. You got to try and prove it to yourself if you're right, or you got to prove me wrong by giving it a shot. That's probably what I would say.
You know, and that's actually a perfect answer, because I tend to take like this whenever I approach something new. And unfortunately, even though I'm in my mid-40s, and I did grow up, I mean, I remember using 8-tracks when I was a kid. But I remember 8-tracks, tapes. I remember using vinyl a lot. I remember the advent of CDs and everything else. But unfortunately, I had to get back into vinyl, and I just recently did that. And I got a couple of albums at a store that you recommended here in Orlando. And what I find interesting is I went right to the jazz, because the research I did told me that if you want to get some kind of experience with vinyl and you like jazz, first of all, because don't buy a jazz album if you don't like jazz. It could sound great, but if you hate the music, then what's the point? But I got a couple of jazz albums, nothing crazy, no big names, you know. And I did a test. Because my record player is also a Bluetooth speaker, I played a song on the record, listened to it, the bass, which was a fretless bass. It's not one of those basses that really hit the bottom, you know. I listened to this song on the record, and I just lifted the needle, and I went right to the MP3 player and played the same song from Spotify. And the difference was gigantic. I actually enjoyed the jazz better on the vinyl. And even being a musician as I am, I can't really put it into words. It just seemed like I could distinguish each instrument better one from the other. And science will say, you know, well, there's no real data loss. The human ear can't perceive the difference. And then there's even science saying that, well, analog has more data loss. Not analog. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say analog. I should say vinyl. Because analog could be tape, could be vinyl, it could be a lot of things. But there's some science out there that says that vinyl, because the needle will sometimes bounce when the high is really high or the low is really loud, the needle has a hard time getting all that. So some people will say, well, there's more data loss on that. There's so much back and forth. I think that your answer is a perfect answer. Just try it. If you think digital's better, then listen to digital. You know, no, let me ask, what about the experience? So vinyl ends up being an experience because it's so tactile. So I'm going to break it down into two parts. The first experience, going to the music store. How does that become an experience in and of itself?
Absolutely. When I go to the one I recommended to you, Park Ave CDs in Orlando, it's like I'm planning my whole day around my record store trip. I'm planning what I'm going to eat before, what I'm going to eat after, and just thinking about my budget. All right, I have X amount of money to spend. I know I'm going to be able to pick up at least 3 or 4 records. It's exciting. It's exciting to walk into the store, say hello to the staff. If you're a regular, they might recognize you. You might get a first name here and there. And just going through those bins, going through the sections, being an organized person myself, the artists are organized A to Z. I think that's awesome. I think I could just, I know who I want. Let me go to the section I need.
Right.
And just finding those deals, finding maybe a used LP that just got traded in that might be $5 off, $10 off. That's the good stuff. And also finding new albums that maybe just came in that aren't rare yet, that are at market cost. It's the best feeling when you find something. I find myself clapping, popping off, yelling when I find a record that I really enjoy. I might have already listened to that record hundreds of times, but when I find it on vinyl, I get excited. So it's definitely an experience that is unique and that needs to be tried by everybody who likes music.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It isn't. I went there once and I bought some. I mean, I'll admit it. I went to eBay and bought like 35 or so albums just to kind of get me that start. But I'm looking forward to going back to the store. The staff was actually really friendly, which I think is nice, because you actually expect the staff to be friendly because you're doing something that it's hard to explain. It's definitely a communal thing. Everyone is there for the same reason. Everyone's looking for music. It's like when everyone goes to like that favorite ice cream spot somewhere, everyone is there enjoying the same thing at the same time. And when I went there, the staff was really friendly, and it was that nice feel of just everyone just flipping through the records and looking for something. Now, I bought 2 albums. I brought them home. I put them on my table, and I played them both from both sides, side 1, side 2 of both albums, and I sat down, poured myself a nice glass of whiskey, and just listened to jazz, and it was really nice. I felt as though just that in and of itself was an experience. Talk, if you don't mind, tell me a little bit about the actual listening experience. You buy the album, you go home. What's the process after that?
So when I get home, if I buy a new LP, it's wrapped up real tight. So I make sure to unwrap it, but I don't want to scratch it. I don't want to dent the sides. It's like a piece of art. And I think something that I mentioned to you before, I love album art. So on an LP, it's nice and big. You can see all the details on the album art. And I think album art is something that artists put a lot of emphasis on. They put a lot of details in. So once I crack it open, I have 2 record players. One's a Bluetooth player, and one isn't a Bluetooth player. So depending on my mood, I'll go with the one that's Bluetooth. If I just want to put it on, if I really want to listen, I'll go with the one that isn't a Bluetooth player. It's a straight up record player. And I always make sure that I don't touch the record other than on the edges. I don't want any greasy fingers in there. And I always try and drop the needle to the point where I get the most scratches possible. I always like to hear more scratches than not. Mm-hmm. And then I just let it rip. And I think something appreciative of some LPs that come on 2 vinyls, you have to get up at least 2 times because you have to flip A to B and then you have to change from C to D. So I think there's more into it than just playing it and leaving it for a couple hours. You got to be engaged. So yeah, that's my process when I first get an LP.
Yeah, that's definitely a nice process. It almost seems like it makes listening to music more personal. You're putting more work into it. And it's funny, I was reading this article, and as I told you, I was doing a bunch of research, and a lot of it was objective. Some of it was subjective. One guy really liked vinyl. The other guy really liked digital. And then there was just this YouTube video I watched that was straight science. And yeah, like you have to get up. I mean, okay, so you have one album with 2 sides, right? What do you have, 4 songs on one side? You gotta get up after 4 songs and flip the album over. So that listening experience becomes an activity. You're almost more engaged. You are more engaged with the music, and I love how it's bringing music back to the organic, where it started. That's how it started. I mean, you and I both know music's been around for millennia. Recorded music hasn't. But still, recorded music started off extremely organic and extremely tactile. And then it went to the impersonal, and now it's like coming back to that tactile again. And it's really something that I like. Now, I'll say something interesting, and this is something that I think a lot of people can relate to. Way back when Galileo noticed the 4 moons around Jupiter. I mean, of course, we know now there's more than 4. But when he noticed the 4 moons around Jupiter, he was able to see them because Jupiter was close to the Earth. Science made it so you can almost, with the naked eye, if you squinted, see a little dot next to Jupiter. But he still had to use a tool that he created organically. He had to look through the atmosphere. He had to experience looking at those moons organically. So I understand, and I am trying to take a neutral stand on both sides, because I record my music digitally and I upload it to streaming services. Everything I do is digital. But I had a good experience listening to jazz through the vinyl record, right? And yes, there's science involved, but listening to music is still an organic experience. And depending upon the weight of the cartridge that holds your stylus, depending upon the quality of the stylus, the quality of your record player, how much shock absorbance there is in the table, all of that. So much is involved in listening to a record. It is always going to be organic no matter what. And I think that that's nice, because when you listen to something digital, it almost is never organic. Yeah, it can't be, you know. So I think a lot of it depends on the the circumstances of the listener. Now, usually what I do, I usually post questions, and I did get a couple of responses about vinyl. Do you want to stay on for me to respond to a couple of questions? You're nodding yes. So I will take that as a yes. So I just asked the question, do you prefer vinyl? Do you listen to vinyl? I got a couple of responses. I got one from Brett. He has been a guest also of the podcast. He has his own podcast called The Skywalk. Oh, you're a Star Wars guy. Dude, you got to listen to this guy's podcast. It's called The Skywalk. It's only Star Wars, and he's had it going for 5 years. Were you going to say something? I saw you bring the microphone.
Yeah, I think we're checking off 2 boxes there that I like a lot, 2 podcasts, so I'd be down for that. Brett or Artie, if you want to send me that link, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, I'll definitely send you the link. He does a great job. And I don't know a bigger Star Wars nerd. Recently, I called him a Star Wars snob. He asked a question and I answered, and he totally hated my answer, and he totally was like, Artie, what's wrong with you? Because he asked about the Han Solo movie, and I was like, hey man, Han Solo should have been played by Chris Pratt. And he totally got on my case about that. What do you think? Do you think that Chris Pratt would have been a good Han Solo?
I think the most important part of that was you needed an actor who wasn't going to try and play Harrison Ford, which Chris Pratt is a good actor who has the bravado to be like a young Harrison Ford. That's not what you needed for Han Solo. You needed an actor who could play a character, and I think Aiden, who I think is the first name of the actor who played Han Solo, did a good job of playing the character. No one's going to be Harrison Ford. That's not going to happen. So I think I like the pick.
Well played. I think you would be a good guest on Brett's podcast. Yeah, because he was kind of like, yeah, nice try, Artie. But so I asked, do you listen to vinyl? Why do you or don't you listen to vinyl? Brett says he would like to listen to vinyl. He doesn't have the time. And it made me think about what you said. You have to go to the store, look around, come home. You can only get 4 songs out of a side. And that's if you get an LP, right? 4 songs out of a side, and then you got to get up. He's busy, so okay. He prefers to just hit shuffle on Spotify, which most of us do anyways. And then my friend Raphael said that he prefers vinyl, and this is what's interesting, and I want to address what he said. He said, I prefer vinyl because it's analog, and analog is better than digital. And for a long time, I always put analog and vinyl into the same box, And analog could be tape. Analog could be other means. It's not always vinyl. When you get vinyl, one of the reasons why a lot of people like vinyl is because when you get that analog sound that's been put onto the vinyl record, when you listen to it, it has life. It could change. It's so very organic, and depending upon your record, you could put your vinyl record on my record player, and it'll sound different. you know? And so that's something I'm still researching it. I'm still online trying to figure this out. But yeah, analog is going to be a more faithful recording. But then again, how are you listening to it? You know? So thank you, Raphael, and thank you, Brett, for contributing. And I think that is it. One last question for you, Sammy. Are you surprised that it's the younger generation that's taking the lead in this vinyl renaissance?
In a way, I am. I can definitely tell the experience I had last time I went. It happened to be Record Store Day, which is kind of a national thing that everyone gets albums that are a little bit more rare, different pressings. And most of the crowd was either maybe 5 years older than me or 5 years younger. So I was a little surprised that, like as you mentioned, there were not more old timers at that store at the time. I think there's something about that this generation is rediscovering what music is supposed to be. They like vinyl. They like live shows. They just like the aspect of that. And I think something that vinyl tends to add that maybe digital doesn't is when you listen to a record, you're usually not by yourself. You're with other people. Or you're sharing a drink. You're sharing some food. So that doesn't surprise me that this generation, or my generation, if we want to say, is taking to vinyl more than possibly the generation when CDs came around and vinyls disappeared. So I'm a little surprised, but it's a pleasant surprise that this generation's going for it. And something I didn't mention before, also, I think something this generation likes is the little things. The sheets of music that come with it, the posters, the pictures, the vocals that if you can't understand what they say, you could read along and you can learn. So I think that's something that this generation like. They like their details, and I think vinyl LPs, they give you that.
Yeah, they do. You mentioned something that's overlooked a lot. You mentioned the art. Album art was huge for decades. All through I don't know much about the 50s. I mean, I know that there was a lot of jazz, and I know that rock and roll was getting started, but pretty much I'm going to say the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Album art was gigantic. I mean, bands like Pink Floyd, they would be in an interview and just mention the album artist by name. They had a guy named Storm, for instance, who did like the light going into the prism and then the rainbow colors coming out. Roger Waters can be interviewed and he's like, oh yeah, no, when we did Dark Side of the Moon, we talked with Storm, and assuming everyone knows who Storm is. But that's the connection. That's the intimacy that these musicians had with their artists. They always had like an artist they turned to come out with album art. That was lost for years. CDs didn't show it. You put the CD in a CD player, yeah, you can get the 8 songs or 9 songs with the press of a button, but the album art's gone. It's on the CD cover, but you just kind of put the CD down. It's too small. YouTube, okay, listen to a song on YouTube. It might show the album art on YouTube. Song's over. It's gone. You go to the next song. So like you were saying, that experience, that personal experience with vinyl is definitely real, and it's nice. It makes music personal again, So that is it. I can't think of any other points with regard to vinyl except to tell the listeners to try it out for yourself. Buy an album and do the test that I did. Listen to a song that you like on vinyl, and then shut it off and put a song on an MP3 player or Spotify. Listen to the same song. You will absolutely hear a difference. Now, whether you like the difference or not is completely subjective. But, it's coming back for a reason. So I thank you, Sammy, for taking the time to talk to us and to be a participant. You have anything else you want to say about vinyl?
Yeah, just I think vinyl's here to stay. I don't think it's going anywhere. And even though vinyl might be a luxury, as you mentioned, most vinyl players are also Bluetooth players. So if you're in the market for a Bluetooth player, think about getting a record player. It's a 2-in-1, and you can get into vinyl as cheap as $5-10. Pick up a couple records. Just start from there. It's definitely fun. You're not going to want to stop. You're going to run out of space. You're going to want to upgrade, but it's a great experience. I think everyone should experience it on their own at least once or twice in their lives.
Right.
Especially if you love music, which we all do here on the podcast.
Right. Very good. Excellent. Well, thank you for that. It's funny. You say something and then it makes me think of something else. Vinyl is here to stay? Yeah, dude, you ain't kidding. You know that satellite they sent out into space? Now, of course, the United States sends the satellite out into space, right? And they think that maybe some kind of extraterrestrial creatures are going to find this satellite. So there's a satellite that's like leaving the solar system. Guess what kind of medium they put this information on? A vinyl record. And because it's out in space where you're not going to get any corrosion, it could last thousands, like plural, thousands of years and still be usable for when the people on planet Zygon find the album and decide to play it. But I just think it's interesting that when you have, this type of, when you need to send a message and you want to make it on something that's going to last, that they chose vinyl. Of course, I don't know when they sent out that satellite. I'm trying to remember what year they sent it out. I don't even know. They might have actually sent that out before CDs existed. But hey, they didn't send an 8-track. So that says something. But thanks again. Did you want to say something?
No, just like you said something that made me want to say something else. I have vinyls in my current collection that were my father's when he was young. They still work. They still play. And if you think about it, if you had CDs in 2000, those CDs don't work anymore. I mean, you did not take care of those. I know I didn't. They're all scratched up and they're gone. But these generational vinyls, they're inheritance. They're something you can pass on. And I think you said the word interesting, a simple word. It's so cool. I think it just has a cool aspect. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. Well, I plan on having a vinyl party. I'm going to get one of those little vinyl record holders that says now playing. And I'll have some people over. Everyone brings 2 or 3 albums that they want to showcase. And we take turns playing a side, And then when they put the record on the turntable, they just take the sleeve or the cover, right? They put it in the now playing holder. And we just sit around and listen to music. You can't get more organic than that.
Yeah, and with time you'll be able to, if you just want to listen to one track, you'll be able to needle drop pretty soon. So watch those lines and you'll be able to needle drop. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure he'll invite me over and I'll try and find something I can play for everybody.
Definitely. Absolutely. Well, thanks again for joining us on this podcast. No, it was my pleasure. And so thank you, Brett and Raphael, also for contributing. Go ahead and follow us on Facebook or Instagram under the name B Sharp and C. Please say no to slugs. Actions speak louder than birds, and absence makes the heart grow geraniums. This is Artie Astor, your host of B Sharp and C, saying until next time. Oh, wait. That's our email address also. I forgot to mention it. My God. So if you want to hit us up on email, if you just want to send some hate my way, we welcome it with open arms at keepitgroovybaby@gmail.com. But anywho, back to what I was saying. This is your host, Artie Astor, saying until next time, keep it groovy, baby.